My career began, as Mickey said, as a funeral director. I started as a mortician and practiced as a mortician for about a dozen years. And I knew that what I provided as a funeral director was really valuable. It started something powerful. And I practiced for most of my practice in a small community with people I knew. So I could see how they were changed and affected. And I got really curious about what is going on there. What is internally happening that is making this big change in people's lives? So when it was appropriate, I decided I'd go back to graduate school, get the degrees I needed to work with people on the other side of the funeral. And that's what I've been doing now for the last 20-some years, is working with the people on the other side of the funeral, or the other side of divorce, loss, whatever it is. And what you're going to hear tonight is pretty universal. It crosses not just death, divorce, but job loss, geographic relocation, health changes, pet loss. It's universal. If you can use it one place, you can use it every place. What you're going to get is about a 6-hour lecture, and I'm going to try and jam it into 45 to 60 minutes. So speed your ears up a little bit, and we'll see where we can go with this. But I want to cover at least 4 categories with you tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about, I start everybody in the same place. There are 2 basic pillars to understanding loss and change, and we're going to talk about those. The meat of what we're going to discuss tonight is the dynamics. This is what I call the anatomy of bereavement. What is it that's going on inside of you? How can you understand it and use it? What's reorganization look like? And what's some good ways to cope? So we're going to cover all of that. You should have a handout in front of you, and you can take little notes.
Do you have an extra?
I don't know that we have extras. I don't think we do. I think I gave out everything I had. If you can share, that's great. Can we share one someplace? If a couple of you can share that. No? We're going to start with the first primary principle that we talked about earlier. The 2 basic principles, this is one of them. The change has 2 sides. That whether you bring the change into your life or whether the change is pushed on you, you still have the 2 sides. There's the gains on one side. And then there's the reverse side of that, which are the losses. Okay? You can't have a change without having both of those things occur. Now, I do a lot of speaking in corporate organizations as well, and they'll often invite me in when they're doing a downsizing or an outsizing or a resourcing, and things are going to be changing big times in the organization. So I usually spend a couple of minutes before I start going through all the cubicles, the offices, talking to some of the people, and I noticed over the years, I got real curious about, they're all having the same change going on here, right? But some of them I talk to will talk about it as a great thing. This is the best thing that's ever happened. It's giving me lots of opportunities and choices. And the other office I'll walk into and it's like, this couldn't be worse. I don't know what I'm going to do. Life's going to hell, and I'm in the handbasket with it, right? So I'm thinking, why would these 2 people these 2 groups see things so differently, right? So I started my own little research project about this. Very unsophisticated, but just kind of my own little noodling. And I'm going to take you through it on your terms and see if you can help understand where I came from. When you had this change in your life, well, no, let me start back with the kinds of changes. How many of you are married? Well, you all are married, right? So would you say that marriage is a big change?
Yes.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what do you gain when you get married?
Companionship.
Good.
Partnership.
Security. Security. What do we gain? Family. We might gain income. And you said extended family. Yeah. Maybe some social status goes with getting married. We're in a coupled community. I mean, we are a species that likes to connect and couple. What do we lose when we get married?
My income.
More income?
Job,
it could have, yes.
Some of your personal freedom.
Mm-hmm. You can't just come and go as you wanted to or like to. Independence, yeah. You have to check in.
Part of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you have to take on something that makes a new relationship. Responsibilities, you lose?
You get more.
You get more. Oh, you gain more. So what else do we lose when we get married?
Family unit.
Okay. You leave your own family to start a new one.
Just the fracturing of the current.
Well, we're talking about marriage now, when you get married, but thank you. And what did people say to you when you were going through that receiving line, follow that marriage? What did you hear people say?
That's good luck. Good luck. They said don't go to bed.
Yeah. Good. Congratulations, best wishes, right? Did anybody here you have my deepest sympathy? No. No? There's always one.
I should have.
So what does that tell you about how our culture perceives this change called marriage? Does our culture see it from a gains point of view first or a loss point of view first?
The woman
A gains.
the man
Very good.
loses.
Now, let's take another change in your life. How many of you have children? Okay, would you say that's a big change in your life as well? Okay. So, what do you gain when you get those little ankle biters? What do you gain? Pride.
Love you've ever known.
The deepest love you've ever known. Yes. Accomplishment.
Accomplishments.
Yes.
Somebody to take care of you when you're old.
You hope. We hope. Yes.
Pride,
Yes.
pride,
Grandchildren.
Yes.
company.
Didn't you gain a little more immortality? The piece of you goes on forever and ever? Yeah. Big gains. What do we lose when we get those little people? Sleep. Independence.
Sleep.
Yes. How about the relationship with your spouse? Did that change?
Lessened.
My sister was married 20, well, I won't say it's that long, maybe 15, 16 years, and they had decided they were just clinically infertile and weren't going to have children. And then one day, she came back from the doctor and she was pregnant. And so she went through the pregnancy, and after the pregnancy was over, she lives in Canada, and they have a midwifery system there. So the midwives come into the house and help them every day after they go leave the hospital to learn how to bathe and feed and, care for that child until she's comfortable on her own. So I happened to call her one day, and and we were talking about this whole deal, and she said, it hit me like a ton of rocks the other day. She said, I was home for the first time by myself with this brand new baby. The midwife hadn't come in at all. It was my day all by myself. And she said, I got through the day and I was sitting on the couch with the baby, and my husband came home. And he walked up to the baby and coochie-coo and play and giggle and laugh and, tickle, tickle, tickle. And after about 15, 20 minutes, he looked over at her and tears were running down her face. And he was just shocked. He said, what's the matter? Why are you so sad? I mean, look, we got this cute little baby, 10 little fingers and toes. She's perfect, And Mary said, I don't know. I just can't stop crying. I don't know. I'm just so sad, right? So what do you do with that? Well, what he did is what probably most of us would do. Let's bundle her up, go to the doctor, and find out what's wrong, right? And what's the diagnosis? Postpartum depression, right? Logical. Isn't necessarily accurate, but logical. And so we were talking about this, and she said, what I understand happened here is, she said, yeah, I'll say some of it's hormonal, but she said, the bigger issue is that when he walked in that room and started playing with that baby, he didn't even know I was there. And she said, for the first time in 20 years, I was not the first thing on his mind. I was not the first thing. And she said, I realized I would never be again. And as happy as she was about that, and as pleased, at the same time, she was terribly, terribly sad that the relationship had changed forever. And that's not a topic that new moms and dads talk about. Rarely does it get talked about. And when we do talk about it in therapy or other places, it's like, yes, 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 I know what you mean. So there's the change of the relationship. That's a big loss, too. But when you had that baby, and people came to see you at the hospital or the baptism or bar mitzvah or whatever it was, what did they tell you? What did you hear them say?
What a beautiful baby.
Yeah, what a beautiful baby. Congratulations. What a joy, right? What does that tell you how our culture perceives this change? Do we see it from a gains point of view first or a loss? Gains. Now let's take I'm going to use the biggie, the divorce or the death. Let's put the word death on there. What do we gain when someone dies?
Sadness.
Freedom yourself.
There could be perceived a kind of freedom to that.
Comes relief.
Reflection.
Introspection, good.
Growth.
Yep. Good. What do we lose when someone dies?
Stability, security. Trust.
In yourself?
Faith.
No.
In life?
Ritual.
Faith? Yes, faith. Oftentimes faith goes out. Sometimes it goes the other way, but yeah.
Consistency.
Self-esteem, self-status, status.
Dreams.
And after that death, what did you hear people say to you?
I'm sorry.
Sorry for your loss.
This is unimaginable. I can't imagine how you're doing this, right? So how does this tell you how our culture sees this? Gain's point of view or loss point of view? So if we look at these three, marriages, births, and deaths, they all have gains, they all have losses. But we perceived a couple of them as gains first before we saw them as losses. Is there something common among those three? Now, I don't expect you to figure that out right away because I've been working on it for a while. That's why we have therapists to help bring reality back to your perceptions sometimes. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, why would that be important to you? And really, it's not so important to you. It's really important to me as a therapist. Because as people come into my office feeling their lives are out of control, and they really don't know where to go or what to do next, what's my most powerful method of helping them gain a level of control back in a life that feels out of control? That's why Barb does what she does here. That's why she brings all of these people in here, so that you can't flounder. You can't try and stay afloat. That you start to get some real powerful, useful tools to get back your personal power, because knowledge is power. And the same is true with grief. The more I can help you understand what's going on with this, the better able you are to catch yourself before you dig yourself into a hole. So that's the first principle. Knowledge is power. And when you start to get really scared and you start to feel your life is out of control, all you have to do is ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to figure out here? And if you can't figure it out, talk to somebody else. They might help you figure it out. And there's always some place where you can go. There's a professional that can help you. There's a piece of information that can help you. All kinds of places where you can go to get information. You can't stay, I don't want to use ignorant because that sounds so critical, but you need to keep moving that information in. So, the second principle is, what's the definition of grief? Now, when I was in mortuary science school, they would give us, it was the tears, it was sadness, it was a loneliness, it was a confusion, it was a disorganization, it was a pain. That was considered grief. But as I started to work with you guys, the experts, what I found out is that's not what grief is. Those are byproducts. Like when I exercise, that byproduct from exercise is shortness of breath, muscle tiredness, and perspiration, right? And what's happening inside of me is those muscles are ripping and tearing and shredding so they can grow and be stronger. That's grief, only on an emotional level. So grief is really the redefinition of self. It's the ripping and the tearing apart of the old you. Who you thought you were before is now being just kind of crumpled up and tossed over there, and your job, all of the distress, all the pain, the sadness, the loneliness, the tearfulness, the confusion, all of those byproducts, emotional byproducts, are you trying to regrow a new you. And it is frightening to be without your own identity. It's frightening to wake up in the morning and look at yourself and not even recognize who you are. Scary stuff. So when I speak to people, they get fixated on, well, it's the loss of the person, it's the loss of this or that and the next thing, the tangible things. And I keep telling them, that's all easy. That's all replaceable. You can replace a relationship, you can replace a house, you can replace, all of that is. What you're working hardest on and longest on is you, me. when I told, you 10 years. With divorce, that's what I see. It takes about 10 years for you to really kind of let go of the trauma, just work through the trauma of this whole thing, and then move to the redefinition.
Why 10 years?
I don't know. I don't know. But that's, when I look at my practice as a professional, I see that progression, and I think that takes a long time for us to understand life. We walk through life, we don't run. We go through it one day at a time, and we take a couple steps forward and 2 or 3 steps back. It's just a...
No matter how long you've been married to?
I won't say that. I'm not going to say that's a hard and fast number. It's a generalized number. Yeah.
My attorney, when I first met with her, she said I represented a lot of women like yourself, and you will be so amazed at who you become in a year or 2 from now. And when she said that, it just gave me hope.
Yes,
because
yes.
It was a very positive thing for her to say. And
It
was very
is.
grateful.
And I think you find you're happy with yourself. Well, you guys will decide that yourselves. That's your job, not mine.
But I hear that over and over too.
Yeah. It's a good thing. Human beings are very, very resilient. There's not many of us that get stuck. If there are, there's something else going on besides that. But we usually just do very, very well in getting ourselves going. Ultimately, we know what works and what doesn't. Now we're talking about the guts. Now we've moved into the next phase, which is the dynamics of bereavement. This is really the meat and potatoes of what I would like you to take home. This is all a very nice, organized graph, right? And it would lead you to believe that this is going to be a nice, organized progress. That first I'm going to be here, and then I'll be here, and then I'll be here, and then I'll be here. And it's more chaotic than that. That's why it's so challenging, because you can be at all of these places at one time. And you can go to one spot, and you can sit there for a very, very long time, and then you're pushed through here. It's kind of like what you were saying. I was pissed for 2 years, and then I had a party for 5 years or whatever, and now I'm grieving. So it's an example of how individualized this can be. So when I hear people say, well, I'm in this stage, or I'm in this phase, or I just kind of go, ugh. There are no stages, there are no phases, there are no steps. We've been misled to believe that.
Like the 7 stages of
Like the
grieving.
anger.
Like the 7 stages. And then Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a fabulous piece of knowledge. But we all misinterpreted it and spit it back as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We were wrong. So I just want to caution you, be careful about judging yourself or judging others or trying to measure yourself against somebody else. It isn't going to work. All you're going to do is put yourself in a position where you're feeling less than. This is yours, individually, and you're all going to do it very differently. I'm just going to talk to you about each of these things, and then your job is to use them productively in your own life. I know that human beings don't like change. That when change happens, we have a tendency to want to push back. And so we call that the protest. And I see it divided up into kind of 3 different categories. When something comes at you, I saw a cartoon a long time ago, and it was about a couple of guys or people driving down a car, and an airbag was exploding. And the phrase underneath it said, well, now that was a big bug. And it said, I looked at that thing and I thought, that is what happens when we fight change. You're driving down this road called life, and you think your life's going pretty good. And then, bam, something hits you and that airbag explodes, right? That airbag is a protection mechanism. Psychologically, we call it denial. Now, denial has 2 functions. It's psychological, but it's also biochemical. When your body is hit with a trauma, it can't tell the difference between a physical trauma or an emotional trauma. It doesn't know the difference. It just knows the experience. And so with an emotional trauma, like a divorce, it's going to boom, and you get an expanse of biochemicals flooded into your body to help you deal with what's happening here. Now, their first response at this overflood of biochemistry happens is it insulates emotion. There's a stunned feeling. You remember feeling that? Kind of shocked, in the headlights sort of feeling. Numb, like you're just going through the motions. This can't be real. It felt surreal.
Experience.
Out of body. You're kind of up here looking at it all down there, right? That's the function of that biochemistry. And then for a long time, it doesn't even feel real. That it just feels like you're walking through and this is just a dream, right? So this chemistry has this powerful value to us, but it doesn't stay there. It's there about maybe 3 months or so, you'll feel that flood. And then it starts to dissipate. And when that chemistry starts to be resorbed and excreted by the body, emotion starts to show through. Now this is when people usually call me. And I've been able to figure out over the years that when someone finally calls to see me, we're at least 3 to 6 months past whatever the trauma is. Because this has dissipated now, the biochemistry side of that has. And now they're dealing with emotions that's scaring the living bejeebers out of them, or they're so overwhelming they don't know how to go about it. The emotional side of it is just that feeling, that experience, and it can't be true. I just can't believe it. But when you read this statement, what does that say to you?
It means you're feeling.
Okay, good. What else does it do to you?
It seems juxtaposed
Yeah,
to
it seems incorrect.
Yeah, opposites, doesn't it?
Yeah.
oxymoron.
Isn't this what we saw in Kubler-Ross's stuff? We saw denial at the first steps, and we saw acceptance at the last, and we thought you had to go through this to get to there, right? When I was in funeral service, sometimes I had to travel 40, 50 miles to make a removal. And one day I got a phone call. I'm getting to the point of this, so just follow me through. One day I got a phone call. It was about 8 o'clock at night. I had to go down to a rancher who died of a heart attack. So I'm driving down the road, and it got to be dark. Went to the home. It was about 40 miles away or so. Sat down with the family, talked for several hours, and brought the body back with me to the funeral home. Now, it was very dark outside. I'm driving down the road. I'm tired. There are no street lights in rural America. And as I'm driving down the road, I hit a dog with a Suburban, right? So as I'm pulling over to the side of the road, I cannot make my eyes go into that rear view mirror. I just sit there for a couple of seconds thinking, oh no, I can't believe I hit a dog, right? And after a couple seconds, I can take a quick peek in that rear view mirror before I look away. And then there's another couple seconds I can look a little bit longer before I look away. And then finally I can stare. All right, there it is. Yeah. Now I gotta get out and look at this. Now, when I said, oh no, I can't believe I hit a dog, what's the denial part of that statement? What's the denial part?
Can't believe it.
Oh no, right? Can't believe. I just went, no. What's the acceptance part of that statement?
I can't believe. I can't believe.
I can't believe is the denial part. I hit a dog is the acceptance part. I knew what wheel hit that dog. I knew how hard I hit that dog, and I knew how dead that dog was. But I could not accept the fullness of what I knew. I had to take it in tiny little snippets. Every time I looked into that rearview mirror, I took a little bit more truth in, and a little bit more truth in, and a little bit more truth in. That's what you're doing. But you got to do it under your control. Nobody can force you into that. You have to do it under your. So if somebody says, "Oh, you're in denial," you should. People would call and say, "We got to do something. Mom hasn't gotten out of the house for a month, right? She's in denial. We got to get her out of it." And I'll say, "Well, how long has it been?" "Well, it's been a month. She should be over this by now, right?" And I would just kind of tell them, "Well, you know what? Why don't you back off a little bit? Give her another couple months and see where we're at. And if she's still there another couple months, call me back. Let her have it. Let you have your denial so that you can come to your own acceptance. You'll get there. If you're walking and talking and breathing, you'll get there." So, the second piece is the anger and the tears and hostility when change happens. Pissed for 2 years. I think whenever we get into a change, it's like somebody has stolen something from us, somebody has cheated us, they've lied, or we can be angry at ourselves, we can feel like we didn't do enough, we're bad people, whatever. The anger piece is a really important piece for us to deal with, because it can really stop your progress. It can really set up a nasty habit, shall we say. And I stole from the AA book of anger, the pyramid, because I learned in 3rd or 4th grade geography that the tip of the iceberg, just a quarter of the iceberg, lies above the water, right? The big stuff, the dangerous stuff, that's what's underneath the water. And when I looked at the anger that I worked with people, I could see that that was just a fraction. You know, it had the biggest noise and made the biggest action, but it was this tiniest piece of what was going on. What was underneath that?
Resentment.
Well, you know, this is just my theory, and I'm not, so it's one person's theory, and some people might disagree with it. But this is what I saw underneath there.
I think they go hand in hand.
The more frightened you and I are on the inside, the more angry. And why? Why are we going to look that way? We are in a culture, I don't know any other culture than ours, so I can't compare, where you cannot not know. You don't want to look like an idiot. You don't want to look like a fool. If you don't know what you're talking about, just fake it, right? Always look good. Always look like you know what you're doing. Always look like you're in control. And that fear that I've done something wrong, or that people are going to judge, or who's going to take care of the car, how am I going to make the payments, are the kids going to be okay, is it my fault? That fear is just shoving all of this to the surface. And so when, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
It doesn't come out as anger. What if it's just pure fear? Like for me, I'm not angry, I'm just fearful.
That's all right.
It doesn't come out as anger.
That's okay.
It's like,
It's all right. The fear is what we got to get to. So you're just getting there, which is great. But often people don't go there. They'll be angry first. And so my point to people is that whenever you feel anger, you know, anger's on a continuum from being mildly irritated, annoyed, or frustrated to being rageful. And then there's all the stuff in between. They're all on the continuum, though. So if you're mildly afraid or frustrated or irritated or perplexed, it's this little nagging fear. But if I'm beating my wife or ready to murder or whatever, now we got a fear that is so far out of control, it's damaging lives. And that's what we have to get to. So when I work with couples in marriage counseling, there was a lot of, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done this. Well, if you wouldn't have said that, then I wouldn't have done this, right? And there's all this trying to shed blame onto each other or off ourselves. And what I would get to is, well, let's just stop this. And now what are you afraid of? What's the fear? What's the fear that's coming inside of you? And it's not somebody gave to you. Nobody put your fear in you. You've had it since about the age of 10. From 0 to 10, most of our fear bank has been filled. And why is that? Because we're the least able to take care of ourselves then. We are the most vulnerable to our environment. So you and I have 3 or 4 persistent and consistent fears that are running around underneath a sub-program all the time. And something I say, or someone else says or does, is going to push one of your buttons, and I won't even know it. And when I push that button, you're likely to lash out at me. And I'm going, what did I do? Right? I didn't do anything. You found a button. And your job is not to impulsively respond to that, but your job is to go in and say, wow, I just had a button pushed here. Which one of these buttons did I get pushed? And your job is to identify that, because if we can name the fear, then we can actually work with it. And our fear